Night City, the so-called City of Dreams. With its beautiful neon signs and its tall corporate towers, nothing is supposed to come close to the beauty given off by this hub of activity. But if you look in, you quickly realize that's not the case. A massive wealth gap, with the ones on top holding an obscene amount of Eurodollars, while the poor starve and live in everyday violence. Companies have their own armies. The government even uses them as their own. Through this, and much more, we see Richard Knight's vision to develop a progressive paradise warped into the dark and dystopian hub that is Night City. If we want to look more specifically on how utopian visions lead to dystopian results, we should focus on the part of the city that Cyberpunk 2077's DLC, Phantom Liberty, introduces, Dogtown. I'm going to focus on how the federal government, the NUSA, directly ended up creating Dogtown as a microscale factor, and how the same government's pursuit of what they think is right ended up creating an AI superweapon human hybrid that would have monstrous consequences on anyone they choose to use it on, while tossing out that same humanity entirely as a macroscale factor. Afterwards, I'll be going into how these two factors should raise concern in our daily lives and our future, not just the video game world Cyberpunk 2077 is set in. With all that said, let's move on to Dogtown. Dogtown was never meant to be the wasteland it is today. The NUSA had originally sent forces there to take part in the Unification War, as they wanted to unite the NUSA with Night City, hence the name, Unification. After the war ended with the signing of the Arvin Accords, Kurt Hansen, a decorated colonel in the NUSA armed forces, took advantage of the situation and went rogue, and along with his unit, the Barghest, took control of a large section of the area that the war was fought in. The civilians of Dogtown, disenfranchised with the Night City government, originally were pretty receptive of Kurt Hansen early on, as he presented himself as the only way forward. This is a pattern of totalitarian states throughout history, where poor conditions in their daily lives made civilians accept an authoritarian-like figure. However, as it started devolving into what it is today, Hansen did not want to give up control, and, as the civilians had already given him power, he made the turning point that totalitarian states usually do in history, which led to what it is today. If you take even 10 seconds to look into Dogtown, you can see that the Barghest are an authoritarian group who treat their civilians very harshly. They abuse their civilians routinely, for little if any reason. The civilians themselves, they're trapped. They can't leave. The only entry allowing people with passes from high-ranking members in Dogtown. The police, Arasaka, or Militech can't enter either. If they try, they are rejected harshly. Kurt Hansen's face is plastered everywhere, very similar to Big Brother from 1984. Mass surveillance is a cornerstone of dystopias after all, further letting the civilians know that the Barghest is watching, no matter where they go. We see patterns like this in our life as well. After the Iraq War ended, the Taliban took over the remains of Iraq. Today, they oppress the people there, while we, the United States, originally went there to make sure Saddam didn't have weapons of mass destruction, our utopian vision. The dystopian consequence after a strong nation pulls out is splinter groups taking advantage of the situation to take control. The utopian vision the NUSA had for Dogtown did not just end up in an authoritarian state popping up, it also led to the complete dehumanization of one of their agents, all to use her as a living weapon. I think it's important that we quickly talk about who Slow-Me/Songbird was. Originally, she was just a really talented netrunner who longed for purpose. Sure, she had friends in an apartment in Brooklyn, but she didn't feel like she fit in. So, when she was offered a chance to become a netrunner for the NUSA, she accepted. She wanted to use her position as an agent to build a better NUSA for everyone. That was her utopian vision. The NUSA, led by President Myers, had a different plan, however. Songbird was the model soldier. She excelled at her work. She would do what is told to an astonishingly good degree, and even betray her fellow agents if the higher-ups told her to.
Got a passenger in his carrier, and I think we might be compromised. Can you hack the trap? Show me.
That's why she was the perfect fit. However, Myers deep down knew that she could still at some point stop following orders as she was still human. If that happened when Songbird had her living weapon status, that would have disastrous ramifications for the NUS. Myers' utopian vision of order and unity would need to fix this, as Songbird's utopian visions would clash with what the NUSA, the state's utopian visions, are. Their solution was to install extremely high-level, and dangerous, technology in her to turn her into what they thought of as the perfect soldier. The problem is, it starts killing her from the inside. The DLC has her taking you throughout Dogtown to try and help her under the guise of saving you. When Myers recovers Songbird, she gets what she wants, the perfect living weapon. Think of it as a final Ludovico technique-like maneuver, similar to a Clockwork Orange, to turn her into a tool for the NUSA. While it would not turn her into an AI, it would mean that Myers would be able to get her to use extremely dangerous and self-killing technology without caring for her personal well-being, with Songbird being able to do nothing to combat it. While not to the extent, it is similar to and criticizing MK Ultra utopian ideals of creating the perfect soldier. Dystopian consequence? Songbird is no longer the same human she was before. There is no way to go back to it. Her utopian visions, and Myers, directly leads to this. And on the macro scale, horrible and dystopian consequences for anyone who falls victim to Songbird when Myers uses her for the NUSA's interests. Further looking at the real world, governments are increasingly looking more to AI for surveillance and safety, the utopian vision being the next step up, since AI is undoubtedly the future. However, as I've talked about, this could bring us dystopian consequences, no longer being seen as a person and just strictly as a tool for the government, or more specifically trying to change who we are, or how we do things with technology under the guise of utopian visions of unity, order, and control. It will have monstrous consequences on us, the worst of which being the dehumanization of each other, all for use by the government. I talked earlier about how Dogtown was the microscale, a war supposedly for unity and reunification, ended up in terrible conditions, making people turn to an authoritarian figure. How that turned for the worse and led to the creation of Dogtown as it is in Night City today. Songbird and Myers, they are the microscale, as they are a warning of what our idea of humanity at its core could become. The mass acceptance of AI to the point of dehumanization could lead to dystopian consequences like humanity losing themselves and governments gaining horrifying weapons. What both have in common? They both stem from the NUSA's utopian vision of unity and control. It's not too late, however. We aren't in 2077 after all. There are things we can do to prevent this, things we can advocate for. We still have an opportunity to fix things. The problem with the utopian visions of the NUSA was for unity and control to the extreme, where AI was adopted en masse by the state to the point of dehumanization. I think we should do our part in emphasizing safe and fair regulations on AI in the government, and also be more aware socially of how AI could change us at a base level. It doesn't even have to be on a countrywide scale either. Perhaps the United Nations could start to get involved if AI use ever gets too widely used in government surveillance or security. For example, they come together to adopt regulations that protect our humanity and keep us safe. Of course, there could be drawbacks to too much regulation. Too much control could lead to stifling innovation, or worse, prosecuting people who do want some form of ethical AI use in the government. It could also lead to us falling behind in the global race for AI. We could be more focused on seeing if acts that are happening globally are helping us in regulating the industry, such as the EU AI Act that just recently happened, which promises to regulate AI. And at the same time, critique things happening domestically, like the $200 million OpenAI deal, which promises security, but as I've outlined in this video, could have dystopian consequences. Night City and Dogtown are the warning, however, and I think a great one. I know I've spoiled quite a bit in this video, but I still recommend you play the DLC. It's one of the best stories in gaming, and I think if we do the things I mentioned, there is still hope for the future. Thanks for watching.